I never thought I'd be making a video about domestic violence, but here we are. You guys, this is a topic that's been weighing on my mind lately, and I feel like it's time we had an honest conversation about it. Domestic violence is way more common than we think, and it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. So let's dive into this together and shed some light on this hidden epidemic. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is domestic violence? It's not just about physical abuse, it's way more complicated than that. Domestic violence is when someone in a close relationship uses harmful or controlling behaviors to instill fear and dominance over another person. It's like this toxic power play that can manifest in so many different ways. You know how in some relationships, there's this constant undercurrent of tension? That's often a sign of domestic violence. It's not always obvious from the outside, but it's there, lurking beneath the surface. Now, let's break down the different forms of abuse because honestly, it's not always as clear-cut as we might think. There's physical abuse, sure, but there's also emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and even financial abuse. It's like this whole spectrum of ways someone can exert control over another person. Each type of abuse is its own special kind of hell, you know? And the worst part is, they often overlap. Someone experiencing one form of abuse is likely dealing with others too. It's like this web of control that can be really hard to escape from. And that's why it's so important to understand all the different forms. Because sometimes, people don't even realize they're being abused if it's not physical. Let's talk about the forms of abuse that people often think of first: physical and sexual abuse. Physical abuse is, pretty straightforward. It's any kind of physical harm. We're talking hitting, kicking, choking, using objects as weapons. Sexual abuse is another beast entirely. It's any unwanted sexual activity, harassment, or even control over someone's reproductive rights. And guys, this is important. Sexual abuse can happen in committed relationships and marriages too. Just because you're with someone doesn't mean they have the right to your body 24/7. Consent is ongoing, and it can be withdrawn at any time. Now, emotional and verbal abuse. These are the silent killers of relationships. They don't leave physical marks, but trust me, the damage is just as real. Verbal abuse is all about using words as weapons. It's constant criticism, humiliation, yelling, threats, anything that makes you feel small and worthless. Emotional abuse is like this insidious fog that creeps into every part of your life. It's manipulation, gaslighting, making you doubt your own reality. It's isolating you from friends and family, controlling your every move. Okay, so let's talk about coercive control. This is like the puppet master of abuse tactics. It's this pattern of behavior designed to control someone through fear, harm, or isolation. And social isolation, that's a big part of coercive control. It's when the abuser cuts you off from your support system, your friends, your family, anyone who might help you see what's really going on. They might say they're protecting you, but really, they're just making sure you have nowhere to turn. Now let's talk about some forms of abuse that don't get as much attention. Financial abuse is a big one. It's when someone controls all the money, gives you an allowance, or sabotages your job. It's a way to keep you dependent and trapped. And then there's spiritual abuse. This one's really personal because it attacks your core beliefs. It's when someone uses your faith or cultural practices against you, twisting them to control you. It's like they're trying to break your spirit, you know? They might use religious texts to justify their behavior or prevent you from practicing your faith. We need to talk about neglect and child abuse too, because domestic violence doesn't just affect partners, it affects the whole family. Neglect is when someone fails to provide basic needs like food, shelter, or emotional support. And child abuse? God, it breaks my heart. It's any form of abuse directed at a child, including forcing them to witness domestic violence. Kids are so vulnerable, and the trauma from this kind of abuse can follow them for life. We need to be vigilant and protect our children because they often can't speak up for themselves. Elder abuse is another form of domestic violence that doesn't get enough attention. It's when older adults are abused by family members or caregivers. They're often isolated and dependent, which makes them easy targets. It's like the people who should be caring for them are the ones hurting them instead. And it's not just physical, it can be emotional, financial, or even just neglect. So, how do you recognize if someone's experiencing domestic violence? Look for changes in behavior. If someone becomes withdrawn or isolated from loved ones, that's a red flag. If they seem anxious or afraid around their partner, or if their partner is constantly criticizing or making decisions for them, that's not okay. And if you notice unexplained injuries or inconsistent explanations for those injuries, that's definitely cause for concern. You guys, domestic violence is a serious issue, and it's happening all around us. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out for help. There are hotlines, shelters, and support groups available. Remember, you're not alone and it's not your fault. We all deserve to feel safe and respected in our relationships. Let's break the silence and end the cycle of abuse together. And if you found this video helpful, please share it. You never know who might need to hear this information.